grade, make sure you talk to me after worship to make sure your name is in the raffle to win this awesome Dear Evan Hansen quote, okay? Today is the last Sunday you can put your name in to win it. Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day, and here's why. Because today at least you're you, and that's enough. Today we close out our worship series on mental health using the musical Dear Evan Hansen. Together we have started the conversation on anxiety, self-doubt, loneliness, depression, suicide, and our spiritual, mental, and physical well-being. We've talked about why relationships matter. Pastor Nathan last week challenged us to really see each other, to not excuse when people act poorly or make bad decisions, but to really see one another and what is hurting the other. And today, we get to talk about our own self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is the awareness of your strengths and your weaknesses, the realistic yet subjective appraisal of your talents, capabilities, and general worth, and feelings of satisfaction with yourself despite deficiencies and regardless of past behaviors and choices. Self-acceptance. Something way easier to say than to actually do. How many of you, when you get a compliment from someone, immediately respond with a but or a well and continue with a negative statement about yourself? How many of you highlight your weaknesses in your head and talk yourself down instead of focusing on your strengths? And how many of you feel like you are just not good enough? Even if you didn't raise your hand, I think it's fair to say that all of us struggle on some level with self-acceptance. And so does our character for this series, Evan Hansen, from our musical Dear Evan Hansen. We have journeyed through most of the musical together, and I'm going to give you a brief recap before we go into the ending. So Evan is a high school student suffering from social anxiety, and he does not have many friends. To help with his anxiety, his therapist has recommended that he write himself letters outlining why today is going to be a good day. At school, another student named Connor Murphy ends up taking one of Evan's letters, and then later that day, Connor commits suicide. Connor's parents assume that Evan and Connor were friends because of Evan's self-help letter that Connor had in his pocket. Evan is overwhelmed by the news of this, and we see that he begins to fabricate a big lie that he and Connor were really friends when they actually were not. And this lie goes on for almost the entire school year until Connor's fake suicide note, which is actually Evan's self-help letter, is posted online and makes people start attacking the Murphy family and blaming them for their son's death. This makes Evan finally decide to tell the whole truth. He breaks down in tears before the Murphy family, admitting what he had done and why he had went along with the lie, because he really wanted a family like theirs. The Murphys are no doubt upset about this and turn away from Evan. And so Evan, having no friends and no one to turn to, goes home and turns to his mother for comfort. His mother has seen the letter online and understood what had happened because she knows of Evan's assignment from his therapist. They each apologize to one another for not being there for each other, and Evan finally admits to his mom that the fall from his tree that caused him to break his arm at the beginning of the show was actually a suicide attempt. He and his mom begin to strengthen their relationship in this vulnerability that they share together. And then the musical jumps to a year later where the story ends. Evan is working with save money for college, and he meets up with Zoe Murphy, who is Connor's sister, and they meet up at an orchard that was named after Connor. Evan apologizes to Zoe and thanks her and her parents for keeping the secret of the lie that he had created. She forgives Evan and admits that everyone probably needed the comfort that Evan's lie gave them for a little while. Then Evan does something that is so hard for many of us to do. Evan writes himself a last letter, admitting and finally being at peace with who he is. Evan found self-acceptance after a very long, dark valley. Evan finally knew of his worth. Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day, and here's why. Because today at least you're you, and that's enough. Now, because many of us at times struggle with our own self-acceptance, you can do a quick Google search online of self-acceptance or self-help, and several therapist blogs and self-help tips will come up in your search. And what I found so interesting this week in reading through these blogs and steps is that they match up really well with our scripture today. So let me show you. Berta, can you go to that first slide? So on the left-hand column, I picked out 9 ways from the internet self-help tips that matched up perfectly with our scripture for today. So on the left, you'll see ways to accept yourself, and we'll walk through it, and then a verse from our scripture that goes in order. So one of the ways that a self-help tip is to perform acts of service for other people. Our scripture starting in verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. Perform acts of service for others. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. Next slide. Another self-help tips, avoid worry and don't let fear get in your way. And then our scripture continues, the Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. Next slide. And our tips continue. Realize that acceptance is not resignation. Create a support system. Surround yourself with loving people. And verse 7 from our scripture, and the peace of God which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Next slide. All right, so our next tips are practice daily affirmations and celebrate your strengths. Practice radical honesty. Verse 8, finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And our last slide. Consider the people around you and admit your mistakes and practice forgiveness. And then Paul reminds us, keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. So how many of you knew that you could find self-help tips in the Bible? I thought that was pretty cool when I went through that this week. So our scripture passage today is helping us to learn how to live in relationship with God and one another, and teaching us how to do that by first loving ourselves. Evan Hansen works through lots of these tips and suggestions in the musical. He has to practice daily affirmations by writing himself a letter about why today is going to be a good day. Through this, he learns positive self-talk. He learns through relationships how to not let fear get in the way of being himself. He eventually admits his mistakes and practices forgiveness and is forgiven. He creates a support system with his mom. And he ultimately realizes that acceptance is not resignation. It's not giving up. He finally realizes his worth. So Paul wrote our scripture today as a letter to the Philippians. Paul was most likely in jail when he wrote this letter to them, and he wrote it to maintain his relationship with this established church and to thank them for a financial gift that they had sent him. And as part, this letter also has pastoral instructions from Paul that he offers for the sort of problems that arise in any committed group of people that are trying to follow Christ. It is a source of pastoral advice and joyful encouragement. For example, there are times when we are tempted to exercise every right law or societal norm because of fear and anxiety. But in Philippians 4:6, Paul counters these fears and anxieties with the command, do not worry about anything. Paul here is urging us to develop an attitude grounded in practice. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. Now, Paul's not saying that there's never anything to worry about, or that the things that we worry about are trivial. No, rather, he places our anxieties, fears, and concerns in the context of our relationship with God. We are invited to make ourselves known to God and to ourselves at our greatest points of vulnerability. We are invited to make ourselves known to God and to ourselves at our greatest points of vulnerability. And further, we are told to do so with thanksgiving before we even know the results. Thanksgiving in this way becomes an expression of our openness to process, because we have confidence that we will be supported and sustained by the one who is faithful. And finally, Paul writes in the last part of our scripture for today, and the God of peace will be with you. This peace that Paul speaks of is a gift because it comes from God. But it's not the type of gift that you put on a shelf that's to be admired and collect dust. And this gift is not an act of divine intervention that suddenly makes all things right. No, this peace is a peace that pushes the limits of our imaginations, challenging us to constantly reconsider what it is that makes for peace, for whom, and how. Because God's imagination is larger than ours. It's a peace that guards our hearts and minds in Jesus. To guard is to protect. God's peace protects us by drawing us into deeper relationship with God, which is the source also of our joy. So the thing that we learn from Paul is that when we put all of our anxieties and fears and concerns and the things that give us self-doubt, when we put all of those things in the context of our relationship with God, we are invited to make ourselves known to God, and not only to God, but to ourselves at our greatest points of vulnerability. And when we do this, hopefully with thanksgiving in our hearts, God will be there and God will protect us from the things that scare us most. When you are able to admit to God and yourself who you are drawing into deeper relationship with God, because you're finally seeing yourself for how God has always seen you. We learn from Psalm 139, 13 through 16a. For it was you, God, who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. Friends, God knows you and has always seen you for whom you have been created. It's time that you start talking to God about your fears and anxieties. It's time to start talking to God about who you are. It's time for all of those negative thoughts to roll off of your back, and it's time to remember that you alone are enough. Maya Angelou has a famous quote, "You alone are enough. You have nothing to prove to anybody." We learn this exact quote through the musical Dear Evan Hansen. We can be instructed through self-help tips on the internet or by your therapist. We're taught this by Paul through this letter that he wrote to the Philippians. And God begs of us to start seeing ourselves the way God sees us. This week, I challenge you. I want you to practice self-talk. Give yourself daily affirmations. Remind yourself of your strengths and overcome your negative thoughts with positive ones. Practice that daily. Then pray to God or write yourself a letter and allow yourself to move into a space of vulnerability with God. Talk about what you're afraid of, what you want to accept about yourself, and say that aloud. Start to love yourself again. Only when you love yourself will you be able to fully love God and love your neighbor. So be kind to yourself and do the work that it really takes to love on yourself. And if you need to go see a therapist, do it. Don't let society tell you that it's wrong or that you're weak for that, because therapists rule. They do. Talk to God and then go talk with someone else so that you can do the biggest job that you've been given by Jesus, which is to love. Love yourself, love God, and love neighbor. If you've ever read that commandment and thought the only thing you have to do is love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor, you're missing one of the most vital pieces that's at the end that says, love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself, how are you supposed to do the greatest commandment that Jesus has given us? It's pretty impossible. So fill in this blank. Dear blank, with your own name. Dear blank, today is going to be a good day. And here's why. Because today at least you're you, and that's enough. Amen. Friends, let us now stand for our closing hymn. It's from our United